Okay. Voyages of Christopher Columbus. Columbus makes 4 voyages. There is a paperback book published by Penguin Press called The 4 Voyages of Columbus, which are in fact Columbus's journals that they have translated and printed. You can purchase these and actually, from his own hand, understand what he was doing and why he was doing it. Okay. Columbus himself was born in Genoa, 1451. He goes to sea at the age of 14, and he gets in with these Portuguese sailors. Okay, he marries well. He marries Filipa Moniz. He marries well because her father was the best friend of Prince Henry the Navigator. So essentially, when her father dies, Columbus inherits all of the technology that he and Prince Henry had kept secret. Now, the Portuguese sailors, it's like a secret society. These secrets and techniques of the Portuguese sailors are kept secret. They're not dead because they want to be the leading pilots, the leading navigators. They're the guys who are going to lead these expeditions. And so Henry has his sailors keep these things secret. It's proprietary. Okay? But Columbus inherits all of it. And good old Chris, he's got a plan. Columbus believes that Asia is 2,500 miles from his front door to the west. Okay? Now, I know some of you in school, not as many as it used to be, were told that Columbus, his purpose was to prove that the earth was round. But most people of the time knew that the earth was round. Since 200 BC, with the, I guess he was the 3rd librarian of the great library in Alexandria. His name was Eratosthenes. Eratosthenes not only accurately measured the circumference of the globe, he also understood the fact that the earth rotated on an axis, because he's the one who establishes the tropics of Capricorn and Cancer. So he actually understands this notion of the earth on its axis and all this stuff. And so Columbus, his purpose wasn't to prove the earth was round. His purpose was to make it to Asia by going west instead of east. That way you don't have to deal with any of these other issues. Okay? Now, in reality, Asia is more than 11,000 miles away. So even though Columbus was a pretty good sailor, he wasn't too good with the math. He wasn't too good with the math. Now, there was also another problem. 2 real big obstacles in his way. Those are called North and South America. Okay? So Columbus doesn't know. And like I said, even though the Vikings had already been here, the Vikings aren't the ones that you go to for the repository of wealth. So even though Viking lore may have an understanding of these places at the far end of the Western Seas, they're not really looking to the Vikings for any sources of information. So Columbus has no clue. He thinks he's headed straight for Asia. Okay? So initially, he takes this information to the Portuguese king. Now, remember, this is 1491. 1487, Bartholomew Diaz has come back, and the Portuguese are very secretive. If you're not involved in the plan, you have no need to know the plan. Portuguese king listens to Columbus's argument that I believe we can go west. And the Portuguese king looks at his plans and he says, I think we're good there, Chris. Good luck with that whole traveling to the west thing. We've got other irons in the fire. And so he keeps it sort of a secret from Columbus. Okay? Now, when the Portuguese turn him down for his expedition, the next place he goes is to the new King of England, Henry VII. So Christopher Columbus and his wife, they moved to Spain, and he goes to Henry VII. Now, Henry is just now reconsolidating his power following the War of the Roses and all that kind of stuff. And even though he probably would have been interested, he just doesn't see this as a risk that he's willing to take. He will not be pleased when Columbus comes back, and he'll find his own Italian sailors. And so then Columbus heads over to the French. The French have no interest. And then his wife says, well, Chris, we moved to Spain. Why don't you go talk to the Spanish monarchs? And he does, right? Isabella and Ferdinand. Finally, he finds his support with them. Isabella and Ferdinand, they give him 3 ships, 2 caravels and a larger ship, a merchantman. Some people, or a small galley, I guess could be its designation. The Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria. In reality, they don't have a lot to lose, right? Because if Columbus, they give him the 3 ships, the most they've got to lose are the 3 ships. Columbus is getting the crews and everything. But if he's right, if Columbus is accurate that they can get to Asia by traveling west for 2,500 miles, that's going to be a good plan. So, off they set, using the technology and the sailing skills he had learned from the Portuguese. Columbus in the Nina and the Pinta and the Santa Maria, they head for Asia. Now, here's the problem. And if you read Columbus's journal, you'll find out some of this. Columbus said Asia was 2,500 miles to the west. 2,500 miles is about here. Okay? And so in his journal, Columbus talks about erasing the line from the navigator, and eventually everybody starts realizing, because they're running out of food, they're running out of water, they took enough provisions for a 2,500 mile voyage, and so eventually by the time they get to around here, Columbus and a navigator are getting ready to be hung from the yardarms and thrown over. The men figured they've got nothing left to lose. They're dying of malnutrition and scurvy. They're not going to take this line down until finally somebody spots land. And you can see that sharp left-hand turn they make to go down to San Salvador Island. And so on the 12th of October, 1492, they land in San Salvador Island. They find as much fresh water. They fill all of their barrels up. They find as much edible fruits and things that they can find. And they get back on the boat, and what do? They keep heading west. Why? Because this island didn't look like what they thought it ought to look like. So let's go to the next island, because that's probably Asia. And so they go to this island, and it doesn't look like Asia. And so they start exploring these small islands. Then they see the large islands, and they shoot a beeline towards the big island. And they go up the coast and down the coast over to this island. And finally, they have to come to terms, right? What went wrong? Well, there's no Asians. They haven't found they haven't found the Japanese or the Chinese or the Hindu. They haven't found the peoples they expected to find, nor the buildings, nor the structures, nor the spices, nor the material. They didn't find anything they expected to find. There was no wealth. 3 months they search up and down those major islands. 3 months. Looking for who? Looking for the King of Japan. Columbus believes they are in Asia. And if it's not on this island, then it must be to the landmass further to the west. Because as far as Columbus is concerned, we should be in Asia. Okay? They finally, after the 3 months searching, they pack up as much stuff as they can haul on the 3 ships. Plus they take 6 of the Taínos Indians back with them to Spain. When Columbus and the boys get back, they are happy, Isabel and Ferdinand are happy as larks. Because immediately they realize something that Columbus, sadly, never realizes, even to his dying day. They had found something new. This was not Asia. Okay? And so Isabel and Ferdinand are happy as larks, because now they've got something that neither the Portuguese nor the Italian nor anybody else has. This is something new that they're going to be able to utilize exclusively for themselves. Okay? Columbus is crowned the Admiral of the Ocean Sea. The 6 heathens, the natives, are quickly baptized, turning them into Christians, and immediately they're taken to the Pope. Pope Alexander IV, if I'm not mistaken, a Medici. He's one of the Medici popes. Alexander really has his eye on becoming the King of Italy, as well as being the Pope. I think he sees the two jobs running concurrently. So why do they do that? Well, this is what they tell Alexander. They tell Alexander that their goals are to go to these people, these primitives, these innocents. Columbus calls them in his journals Indios. He says, I found a people, Indios. Most people say, look how stupid Columbus was. He called them Indians because he thought he was in India. Well, that wasn't what Columbus thought at all. Columbus called them Indios. He found a people who were innocent in God. That's where Indios comes from in that terminology. They told the Pope their purpose was evangelism. We are going to the New World, this new place, and we are going to evangelize. We are going to bring Christianity to their shores. Of course, if we happen to find some stuff laying around, we might bring it back and try to sell it. But our primary goal is evangelism. Now, the Spanish do, starting with the second voyage. Every time they send ships to the New World, there is a group of priests that go with them. Matter of fact, the second voyage of Columbus, Bartholomew de las Casas goes with Columbus on the second voyage. And de las Casas is going to become one of the biggest critics of the conquistadors and their treatment of the Native Americans, coming from this priest back to England to complain about their behavior. Now, what the Pope does is he gives his blessing. He declares a line, right? And he declares that Spain has control of everything from Spain to the west. The problem is the Portuguese already control all of this, and they guard it jealously. So, what the Portuguese and the Spanish do, since they are such good friends, is they come up with a plan and they sign a treaty. The Treaty of Tordesillas, 1494, which draws a line here. Everything on this side of the line belongs to the Portuguese. Everything on this side of the line belongs to the Spanish. That's why when a ship accidentally lands here, what we think of as Brazil, they send Amerigo Vespucci to determine which side of the line. That's why the people in Brazil speak Portuguese, but the people in the rest of South America speak Spanish. Okay, because where they landed was on the Portuguese side of the line since the very beginning in the 1500s. This line has marked off this territory between the two big superpowers. Now, Columbus makes 3 more journeys. I won't talk too much about them. He comes back, 17 ships, over 1,000 settlers and workers. Most of these workers are treasure hunters and soldiers. Shipwreck happens. and they have to leave men on one of the islands in Hispaniola. They wind up all getting killed, which causes the workers to put them in chains. Things get really bad for Columbus. Columbus is positive that he's in Asia. He's positive. In his last voyage, it starts in Cuba, and it heads towards the mainland, right? In 1502, and he searches the coast for over 2 years. He searches the coast, looking for Asia, looking for the route to Asia, looking for how you get to Asia from here, because he's sure that Asia is just one. He's sure that Japan is just one hop across this to the next landmass. Eventually, in 1504, his men mutiny on him and lock him in chains, and they go back to Hispaniola. Columbus will be sent back to Spain in chains. He will then be placed under house arrest, and he will die the next year. The whole time thinking he had made it to Asia. The whole time thinking he had made it to Asia, which is really kind of a sad commentary on Columbus's end. Now, gotta keep my clicker word. From this point on, things start to change. This is another really good map that shows all the later exploration. It not only shows the Spanish exploration, which there was a massive amount of Spanish exploration all through this region. For that first 100 years, almost, they are almost exclusively the ones exploring. But eventually you will get the French and the Dutch and exploring all through this region up through here, trying to stay as far away from the Spanish as possible during this time period. Now, a couple of the other explorers I want to talk about. This is John Cabot. When Henry VII finds out what Columbus has discovered, he's pretty upset that he had turned Columbus down. However, Giovanni Caboto, an Italian sailor who we will call John Cabot, is the anglicized version of his name, he is going to sail for Henry VII, and he finds Newfoundland, the same place the Vikings had landed. Eventually they'll start finding the ruins of part of this Viking civilization, because it was hard for them to traverse the waters of the North Atlantic. It's lots of ice flows, lots of icebergs and things like that. And so when he comes back, his ship is filled with barrels of salted fish and things like this. This is a massive food source that's going to be for England. And he is, again, knighted, given his coat of arms, and they plan a second trip. His son is placed in charge of the second ship, and so as they're leaving, the son's ship is broken somehow, and he has to wait. John Cabot says, I am going to go on. You meet me there when you get a chance. So John Cabot leaves. When the son finally arrives in Newfoundland, John Cabot hasn't arrived. We've never heard from him again. We don't know what happened. This is the North Atlantic. I mean, after all, that's where the Titanic was sailing, and we know what happened to it. So these smaller ships caught in ice flows, mangled by icebergs, all these kinds of things anything could have happened to the ship. But this is the beginning of English exploration into North America. But they are staying clear of the Spanish. They are trying to stay as far away from the Spanish as possible. Who else do we have? We have Amerigo Vespucci. He's a true Renaissance man, passion for geography, cartography, map making. He sails with the Spanish to the New World in 1499. When Cabral accidentally lands in South America, they contact Amerigo Vespucci to go and find out, to use his geography skills to find out which side of the line it's on, and he discovers it's the Portuguese side, and so hence Brazil becomes the Portuguese holding. In 1507, he returns to Europe, and he goes to a German map maker, and he wants him to make these pristine, very high quality maps that has depth settings and the depths of river mouths and where the reefs are. It's got all of this material on it, but it's private. And so he has the map maker to create this map of the New World. And some people believe that his name was written on the map, hence how they got the name. I don't know. I don't know if that's just an old wives' tale, but I guess Vespucci did more to record the geography and the cartography of both North and South America than I believe anybody else did. And so essentially I believe that's why it came to be named the Americas. Other people, Cabral is heading for the Indian Ocean, accidentally gets thrown off course, accidentally lands in Brazil. That's who we were talking about earlier. Vespucci checks it out. They land down here, and Vespucci tells them what's what. Now, let's see. Balboa crosses the Isthmus of Panama and makes a little trip up the coast, just exploring during this area. And then in 1519, Magellan leaves on his voyage. Magellan leaves with 5 ships and 250 men. They want to see if you can get to Asia by going this direction. In 1520, Magellan himself is killed by Filipino tribesmen, so Magellan actually never himself circumnavigates the globe. He's killed in the Philippines. When they finally get back, they have 1 ship left, only 18 men, and they're sick. They're sick, but they're able to limp the ship back. Everybody thinks of it as this great thing that Magellan leaves and he hopscotches around South America, and then they get down here to Cape Horn. Look how much further south Cape Horn is than the Cape of Good Hope. This is almost Antarctica. We think the North Atlantic is bad with the ice and the storms and everything. This is bad. These ships get ripped to pieces. When they get past Cape Horn, they shoot an azimuth to go up to Asia. They finally find the Philippines. They land in the Philippines. As they land to go find fresh water and food, Magellan and his men are attacked. They leave. They don't even go to China. See, the Europeans knew about all this area. They don't even go to China. They head straight for the Cape of Good Hope. Once they fill their single ship up with enough water to get them home, they go straight to the Cape of Good Hope, and then they shoot straight back up to Europe. They're done with it. It was an abysmal failure. We always think of Magellan's trip as being this wonderful, successful trip that proved circumnavigated the globe. But in fact, the only thing it really proved was you can get there going this way, but it's a disaster. It's a disaster. It proved Columbus was a pretty good sailor, but he just wasn't good at the math, because now they realize just how far Asia was. Now, from this point, from Magellan on, everybody who heads west is no longer interested in what they can get from the east. They are now interested in what's in the quote-unquote New World. Okay? I think that's where we're going to put a pin in it for tonight. The stuff from the New World is going to start attracting European attention as time goes on, especially the massive foodstuffs, and eventually the gold. When we come back, we're going to talk about this concept, the Columbian Exchange. The Columbian Exchange is the exchange of goods and materials and produce and philosophies and ideologies, and even microbes and diseases from Europe to the Americas for the first time. The exchange that happens after Columbus, because both sides are going to be impacted, enormously impacted by what's going to take place. And as we'll talk about, we'll see who gets the better of the deal.